Hello. Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here and in New Charnoth territory on the beautiful ocean, and happy to be here. I was supporting some of the youth yesterday that were marching to bring awareness from Vancouver to Victoria to the legislative building, and to bring awareness to the TMX and some of the trees that are going down in Furry Creek as well. And so it was really great honor to be there and to support those young guys. And but yeah, welcome. And tonight we're excited to have Rex Weiler, a longtime friend of the George family, from multiple generations. But first we're going to jump into, and we have Christine here from Sacred Ecology, and she's going to be dealing with technicals. So you might see her screen go off and on once in a while. And then there she is. And then you have Peter from Wilderness Committee that's going to go ahead and try to give us some updates on what's happening right now around TMX and any other environmental issues that are coming about. Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Ruben. So it's been a big week, and it will continue to be a big week on the Trans Mountain Pipeline fight. First off, there's some. I wanted to talk about the insurance campaign. This is one of the most sort of effective tactics we've seen since the government's bought the pipeline. They basically have said, they have unlimited money. They're the government, and so the strategy has been since then to target the insurance companies, because the pipeline in its conditions has to have insurance, and if nobody will insure it, oil can't go through. And so there's three large American companies that, really this international movement right now is targeting. AIG, Liberty Mutual, and Chubb are some of the major insurers for the pipeline. And Trans Mountain actually wrote the regulator, so the Canada Energy Regulator, saying, please don't require us to release the information about who's insuring us, because these insurance companies are being targeted and they don't want to give us insurance anymore. And so, they basically, Trans Mountain has said that the strategy is working, and has kind of pleaded to the regulator to let them off the hook. And, the idea that the Canadian people own this pipeline and they wouldn't be able to be transparent about the insurance companies that are targeting them, just shows you all the cloak and dagger this thing kind of has to hide behind. And so we're waiting on the Canada Energy Regulator to make that ruling. But lots of folks, I know Tsleil-Waututh, Robin Allen, who is former head of insurance, ICBC, the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, wrote in and said, it's just unacceptable for them to hide these insurance companies. So folks had been out, there were people on Friday out at the insurance company headquarters in Vancouver, or their offices anyway in Vancouver. And that's happened a couple times where there's been actions outside, there's been arrests. And I know that some of the folks who were arrested recently are looking for legal funds. So I'm going to try and post that link once I'm done. That's a huge portion of the TMX fight right now. But of course, what's going on the ground? I've been mentioning the hummingbird warriors, and this weekend we did get confirmation that the federal government has stopped logging in that area just right near the Brunette River Conservation Area in Burnaby. And so it's a huge victory for the people that have been out, finding these little nests and making sure, Trans Mountain actually respects the rules. And it turns out they didn't, and destroyed two of the nests, which has led them to have a work stoppage in that area. The other pieces I wanted to talk about, there was a report last week that the federal government has given $18 billion worth of subsidies to the oil and gas industry in 2020. A massive chunk of that being the Trans Mountain Pipeline, because this is just another subsidy, building a pipeline for unlimited funds. so these oil companies can ship their oil out west here. And so, I found it interesting. The federal budget was yesterday. They had 17 something billion dollars for green plans, but that's entirely offset by the fact that they're putting $18 billion worth of subsidies towards the most polluting industry in Canada. It's, by far, the oil and gas industry pollutes more than every car, boat, plane, train, all transportation in all of Canada. So they're the ones we need to be taking on. And hopefully, I'll end on a hopeful note that the Biden Climate Summit is coming up this week. And it seems like the Americans have really been leaning, it's no secret that they've been going around the world and saying, you need to step up on climate change. After abdicating their responsibility for a while, they're really trying to pull into the lead here. And hopefully Justin Trudeau and the federal government are expected to come with a new climate target for Canada for 2030. And we know that the existing climate target for Canada already makes the Trans Mountain Pipeline unnecessary. And so ramping up that ambition, it's pretty clear Trudeau has a choice to make. He can either keep building this pipeline, keep expanding the most polluting industry, or he can go along with the rest of the world and double down on our ambition on climate change. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about for our news. Ruben, did you have anything else you wanted to mention?
No, I think those things are good. I just, as well as the good work that's been done in insurance, it's also going after the investors. I keep wanting to mention that $246 billion taken out of the New York pension fund and out of the Alberta tar sands last week, and the insurance is just as important. It's just as important. So all those people that are doing all that good work, and including some of our Tsleil-Waututh people and all the other organizations and allies that are banding together, it's so important. And I love it that little, I don't know if you ever seen a hummingbird nest, but it's only like big as my glasses right here, just one side. And it's just beautiful that it halted the construction on Burnaby Mountain of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So my hands up to those people too that have been monitoring and have been watching and have been doing all those things. And yeah, we need to come from all these angles. I think when Trudeau goes to that meeting, some of us should be there. I think when he goes to the United Nations, we should be there too, and explain what is trying to get through. Like, for example, United Nations, remember he wanted to be on the Security Council, and they denied him. They said, well, we gave you recommendations a year ago and you didn't go about your mistreatment to First Nations and the land and the environment. And he said, no, we're not taking you on our Security Council. And of course he wasn't voted on, but that's what we got to do again. If he wants an international name on himself, be international leader. And remember his campaign promise as a climate change, protect the climate leader. And you don't approve pipelines when you do that. So we got to call him out, and we got to push him out, but also remember the people that are waiting in the lines to try to take over for him. We have to recognize that they're just as bad. But Canada, we need to make better choices for future generations, or we're screwed. Look at we have an annual ceremony, and we try to do it in the sun, and the date has been pushed back. It's Daryl Bob's traditional territory up in Lillooet, his land, and we keep having to adjust. It was in June, but they keep saying, the elders are saying the summer comes later. All the seasons have shifted by a couple of weeks for that area. So now we're putting it into the very beginning of September, where it's still warm, and usually the weather changes by then, but they tell us they're fine. And I've been there during that time, but everything's changing. That's my point. It's just changing drastically, and we don't have to look very far. In my short lifetime, every creek and every stream and river had trout and salmon in the North Shore. Every one of them. Even the ones that are in the middle of Lonsdale, I remember going and looking, and there's fish there when I was a kid. And the Dungeness crab and the oysters and clams, and right in the Maplewood mudflats and Tsleil-Waututh territory right there, it's all changed. And our future doesn't look good. And that's why we have to be persistent. That's why we have to give up. And that's why we need to come from all angles and explain this and educate people on the true facts. They don't have to look very far to look out their own windows to understand that things are changing and they're not good. But if they want to do more research, really do it. Really figure it out for themselves. Don't take Trudeau's word for it. Don't take his word for it. Holy smokes. We've proven it over and over again with multiple people and the people that you mentioned. Robin Allen, we worked with her on multiple economic assessments of the pipeline, spill analysis, clean analysis, air quality studies, all these things proven. It doesn't make sense. So, we have to hit those insurances hard and say, what are you doing here? What are you doing? Because the economics of it, of a spill, like look at Exxon Valdez, almost 30 years later, still a mess. Everything's still dead. We know for a fact that 500,000 birds will die and never be replaced. 1 million people will get sick. Not if, but when a spill happens. The dredging that's going to have to happen is going to screw up everything. We're working hard to fix our ecosystem. First time in 40 years to Tsleil-Waututh Nation to clam harvest. We're a little nation with allies. We're cleaning the inlet. Our salmon count went down to 6,000. We brought it up to millions in 10 years by using old ancient techniques of our people about creating spawning beds. And the elk reintroduction brought back bears, grizzly bears and wolves and everything. So we're trying to fix it. And these guys are they're going to create havoc. And we have to think of our future generations. We do. We really, really, and for that matter, our own future. But anyway, I'm on a big rant now. You got me going, Peter. Anything else, Peter or Christine, before we jump into our interview with my good friend Rex?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick introduction. My name's Christine Peterson, founder and director of Sacred Ecology, which is a documentary film project, production company, and online publication about the importance of cultural and biodiversity preservation. I'm here supporting my good friend Ruben George and his live stream, Truth, Family, Culture, and Health. Ruben George is, one moment. Ruben George is the Sacred Trust Manager of Tsleil-Waututh First Nation up in BC, Canada. He's an environmental activist, spiritual leader, Sundance Chief, and grandson of Chief Dan George. Today, our special guest is Rex Whaler, who is a writer and ecologist and co-founder of Greenpeace International. Welcome, Rex and Ruben, and I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say.
Cool, there we are, Rex. There's so much to talk about. I know you've done so much, and I had the honor to go to Europe with you, and we're Brazil, right? And so I was honored, and I've been to your house. I recognize your dinner table's a little back to the right over there, and it's such a beautiful spot overlooking the lake, and but one thing that comes to mind, I think people would like to know. And well, let's first tell us who you are, and then I ask a question.
Well, first I want to say hello to Daryl. I see Daryl's iPad. I want to say hello to Daryl, and of course, welcome our other guests. There's Daryl, and well, Ruben, I don't really know who I am. I'm trying. Spent my life trying to figure that out. But one thing that I feel really proud of is I've had a long relationship with the George family of the Tsleil-Waututh, and Ruben's uncle married my wife and I 30 years ago, and Ruben and I worked on the Trans Mountain Pipeline project, and are still working on the Trans Mountain Pipeline project with Peter and others, because it just goes on and on. I just can't tell you how frustrating and disappointing it is, that Trudeau. I was around in the era of Pierre Trudeau, which was Justin's father. Pierre Trudeau at least had some guts and would stand up to the Americans and would stand up to the corporations. This kid is just pathetic. It's really sad. And the fact that he dumped all of this Canadian money and resources into this unnecessary pipeline project, which Peter has pointed out, absolutely unnecessary pipeline project. Billions of dollars that could have been spent on food security and schools and energy security and everything else. So anyway, I was involved with Greenpeace in the 1970s. I've been in environmental activism most of my adult life, all of my adult life, since I was a teenager. And it's just led me down a path that has led me to just fascinating relationships with people like Ruben and all of you. And, you know, standing up for Mother Earth it's the most sacred profession as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, she gave us our life, and any little bit we can give back, I think that's pretty much all we can do. That's the best thing we can do. So I'm really happy to be here, Ruben, and what should we talk about?
On me, I heard this story before, and I was so intrigued by it, because what you created is such an iconic thing that created a lot of change for our world and still continues to do. And that's how you came about creating Greenpeace, and even the name. You shared how you guys came up with the name, and I think some of the people listening would really like to hear that, because they're still doing really good work around the world. It's international, and you know, it started in Ecological territory, and I'd like to hear that again, how it started and how you came up with the name.
Well, I should mention first, where I am. I'm on Cortez Island, and that's Clahus and Tlahamin and Homalco territory. And it's just north of Vancouver, where Greenpeace started. Now, in the early 1970s, I came to Vancouver as a draft resistor from the United States. I had refused to be inducted into the U.S. military, and so I came to Canada, and that's when the time actually I was talking about Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau was the Prime Minister at the time, and he was welcoming American draft resistors into Canada, and I was one of them. And I had read a book called Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. And that book really changed my life. It made me realize, wow, we're not looking after Mother Earth. No matter what, we can have careers. We can go to school. We can have careers. We can be successful in the world, whatever. But it's not going to matter if we don't look after Mother Earth. So that book really changed my mind, and I was very interested in ecology at that time. But at that time, which was the early 1970s, was also a time of the peace movement, and I was involved in the peace movement. When I got to Vancouver, I met many people in the peace movement in Vancouver, and Vancouver was a very interesting place at that time, very lively. It was. It was the summer of love. It was hippies, and it was an interesting time in Vancouver, and we were involved in the peace movement, and we were trying to stop nuclear weapons testing by the United States and also by France. People today don't realize the stuff that was going on. They were testing nuclear weapons in the ocean. They were blowing up islands in the South Pacific and up in Aleutians. It was just crazy. And so we were working on stopping the nuclear testing. And one of the other Greenpeace founders, Irving Stowe, we used to say peace at that. There was always kind of a thing people said, peace. And so at the end of the meeting, Irving Stowe says peace, and there was another guy, there was another friend of mine, Bill Darnell, who was at that meeting, and he was interested in environmental in the environment too, and protecting our ecosystems. And he said, let's make it a green piece. And that was the moment that name came to be. We were when everybody heard that word Greenpeace, that would just he meant it as, let's add ecology to the peace movement. And we just stuck those two words together, and that's what we called the organization. And we were doing ecology actions. You know what we used to do, Ruben? We used to go up the Fraser River. We had an old boat. And in those days, it's hard to believe now, but this is what they actually did. The pipes from the factories actually came right out into the Fraser River, and they were just dumping whatever crap, toxins, waste, chemical waste, right directly into the Fraser River. So, you know, you think you were talking about the salmon. You know, when you grew up, there was salmon in every river on the coast. And now so many of those salmon rivers are dead. Well, that's part of the reason. They were just dumping their crap right in the rivers. And we used to go up the river in a boat, and we make these giant corks. And we would take the film cameras, we'd take the media with us, and TV cameras and stuff, and we would go up and we'd take these giant corks and we would cork the pipes. And we would film what we were doing. And but we were looking at that time, we wanted to do something that would be a huge kind of international impact, that would have an international impact. And we knew at that time that the whales all over the world were being hunted to extinction. There were only like 5% of the original populations of the whales were left in the oceans. And we thought, well, that would be a campaign that we could do that would introduce the entire world to the idea of looking after the ecology, of stepping up, standing up for other creatures, not just for human beings, but for all creatures. And so we organized a campaign to take a boat out and get between blockade the whaling ships, essentially. And that's what we did. And that was the first real ecology action, global ecology action of Greenpeace. And keep in mind, that all started in Vancouver, little old Vancouver, in the early 1970s. And we were just street kids. We didn't have any money. You know, we just cobbled it together, and we raised, you know, we used to sell Greenpeace pins for 25 cents. That's how we raised money. But that was in the 1970s, and that was the beginning of Greenpeace. And you know, Greenpeace today has offices in something like 50 countries all over the world. They're doing actions all over the world. So that's something that Vancouver gave to the world.
Yeah, no kidding. It's such a big thing now, and it's important. It's important to have that voice, and important to have leadership, and to strive forward, and to create change. And isn't it crazy? I know in some of your literature and some of the things that we talked about, that, you know, for example, the whales, taking it out of the ecosystem. Look what that would do to everything. Or the kelp, where you see the kelp dying, how it supplies so much oxygen to our atmosphere to help us to breathe. Or the bees, you know, if you take away the bees, it screws up everything. So much matters that people don't know and don't understand. And I know that you write about in some of the things. Can you mention some of those things about?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to understand, I think this is one of the big lessons of ecology, and I think it's something that the indigenous nations have understood, just naturally understood, that if you live in a place, you begin to understand this, and it's that everything relies on everything else. We're not individuals. It's just like being in a society. We don't survive as individuals. We survive as families and groups and societies and communities. And but it's bigger than that. Without the bees, without the whales, without the atmosphere, without the soil, we're nothing. So really the message of ecology is that we're not parts, we're not individual parts of a system. We are within the system, and we're all connected. We all rely on each other. And that's the message of ecology. And I think it's also the message, of democracy, is that we all rely on each other, and we have to learn to care about each other. So, I've written about the bees, I've written about the toxins in our environment. Look, this problem with the bees is a real deal, because we're putting so much poison into the ecosystem that we're actually, pesticides, mostly pesticides on our crops and so forth, that, we're killing off the bees. And that's a real thing. I mean, this isn't something somebody made up. The bees are dying off. And there's places in California now, there's beekeepers who keep their bees in these giant trucks. And they have the beehives in trucks, and they drive them around from orchard to orchard because the natural bees are gone. I mean, can you imagine, like, we're driving colonies of bees around to pollinate our orchards because we've killed off the natural bees, and this is the state that we are now in. I'll mention something like the toxins, the endocrine disruptors. I don't know how much you and your guests know about some of the stuff we put into the environment. But we've put chemicals into the environment that disrupt our entire endocrine system of our bodies, and it not only does that to us, and of course this is one reason we have so many modern diseases, like cancers, and mental diseases, and all kinds of modern diseases that are caused by these chemicals in our environment. So, the entire human family is really now faced with a crisis. Now, you know what? I don't think, this is my opinion, Ruben, I don't think it's because humans are particularly evil or stupid or we're just, we may forget, we're just animals also. But you know what? We gain so much power, the power of our ability to manufacture and convert the wild world into products to make money. And this greed of money has led us down this path. Well, now we see where this path of money has led us. It's led us to a crisis, a global crisis of the health of our Mother Earth. So, and I don't think you have to be a scientist. Certainly there's a lot of scientists in the world today who are telling us we have to change our ways. We're heating up the Earth with carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We're poisoning the Earth with the chemicals we put into our environment. And the seabirds are disappearing, the plastic is building up in the ocean. We can see all that. But I don't think you have to be a scientist to understand the problem. I think any child growing up in the world loves nature, loves the wild world, loves other animals. I think what happens to humans is that we get that sensitivity to the wild world, I think, gets educated out of us. our schooling and our education teaches us that we're private individuals and we have to make something of ourselves, and we have to that we're all alone in the world, and that we have to make our own way. Our education system doesn't teach us that we are a family, and that our family extends beyond just people, that extends to all the other animals in the world. So anyway, I think we are in a crisis. I think that, everybody who's here on your webcast, we're all here because we want to do something and we want to help. And I know I've worked closely with you and your family, Ruben, on the pipeline issues in Vancouver and so forth. And I know that you personally are committed to healing the world. And I don't know what to say other than we just have to keep going. We cannot give up. We have to just keep pushing and keep pushing. And that's what we're doing. We're going to have a discussion tomorrow. We're going to be talking with Indigenous people and ecology activists from all over the world tomorrow. And Ruben is going to join us on that call. And I'll give you a link here. I'll put it in the. I just put a link there in the chat. If you want to check the chat, that's the link for our Zoom call tomorrow. We're going to be talking to some of the people whose communities have been destroyed by the oil industry in Ecuador. One of the women on who's going to be in our discussion tomorrow has done a report on just the crimes of one oil company, Chevron oil company, who has dumped billions of gallons of toxic waste in Ecuador. But they've also done the same thing in Nigeria and in other places around the world. And she's written a report of crimes, actual crimes committed by Chevron Corporation in 31 countries all over the world. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow, and Ruben's going to be joining us on that conversation. So those of you who, please join us. We're going to carry this conversation on. And that's one thing that I think is so important, is that, sometimes we get frustrated at the state of the world, and we get frustrated at the way things go. But you know what? Like, because we're all together and we come together and we support each other, and that gives us strength. And so I'm really grateful to be invited here, Ruben and Christine, and really honored to be here. And it's just part of what we need to do to give each other strength.
Thanks, Rex. And Christine did post it on our networks, so it's gonna head out. And I look forward to visiting. And I'm really interested in that Chevron report. We have done similar reports, but this sounds really interesting. So that's something that I know that I'm a part of. So I'll be listening to. So that's great. Rex. What is interesting is you're always in the mix of starting some pretty big things. It was actually you and others that pulled us together to have our first initial Kinder Morgan meeting up in West Vancouver there. And why don't you share that a bit? Because some of it's, you went looking for somebody and you found it.
That's a funny story. That's a funny story. Okay, I had a friend, my friend Bill Gannon, you may remember, who worked downtown in Vancouver. He worked up in one of the office buildings downtown in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And he came to me and he said, Rex, well, how come there's all these oil tankers in the port of Vancouver? And I said, no, I don't think so, Bill. I said, I don't think they're bringing oil tankers. Why would they be bringing oil tankers into Vancouver? It's not an oil port. And he says, no, these are oil tankers. Okay, so I went with him down to his office. And we sat there for a while, and sure enough, here comes this giant oil tanker in under the First Narrows and then under the second, and goes through the harbor and goes under the second narrows. What the heck is that? Now this would have been about 2007, 2008. So 10, 12 years ago, something like that, 14 years ago. So we started digging in what the heck is going on. And we found out that they were converting that old terminal, which is now the Kinder Morgan terminal, was the Kinder Morgan terminal, and that what they did is there was an old BC gas line that sent gas to Alberta. This company bought that gas line. This was during the old privatization times in BC by the Liberal government, BC Liberal government. They sold that pipeline to a private company, and then the private company flipped that gas line, and they were going to bring bitumen from the tar sands to North Vancouver, or to the Kinder Morgan Burrard Inlet terminal, and they were going to use Vancouver as the tar sands shipping port. That was their plan. Well, we found out about it, and we thought, no, we got to raise some noise about this. And the first thing we thought was, well, we've got to talk to the people at Tsleil-Waututh, because this is their territory. So if we're going to do something here in Tsleil-Waututh territory, we got to connect with the Tsleil-Waututh people. And I knew your uncle because he had married us, but it had been a while since I'd been over there. And Ben West and I looked around. We heard about some place that Tsleil-Waututh had an office, and we went there, and it was the wrong place. We couldn't find the who to talk to. We couldn't find out who to talk to. We went over to the Tsleil-Waututh office, but there wasn't anybody there that could help us or whatever. And so, but a friend of ours knew Brother Phil. I think some of you may know Brother Phil. He's a good friend of Ruben's, and someone who's really helped us a lot. And she invited Brother Phil to a meeting at her house in West Vancouver. So I went to that meeting with Ben West, and those were our friends, Vandy Savage and John Cooksey and those people. And Brother Phil brought you, Ruben, to Vandy's house. And we sat down and we had a meeting about this. And that was the beginning of the Trans Mountain campaign, that dinner. And I remember that Brother Phil had said to us at that meeting, he says, okay, and you did too. You were saying, okay, we'll help you, but here's the conditions. Here's the conditions. Number one, this has to be led by the indigenous people. This has to be led by the Tsleil-Waututh and the Sliammon and I guess the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish people. So we said, yeah, of course, And secondly, that this has to be a spiritual campaign, and that we have to approach this from a spiritual point of view. So we agreed, like, yes, we will follow you. You're in charge. Well, so the first thing was that we came over to the Tsleil-Waututh to do sweats. Now, a lot of my friends in the environmental movement, they wanted to get on with it. They wanted to blockade ships and start doing public actions. And I told them, I said, no, we're not in charge. We're going to just do what Ruben the Tsleil-Waututh people and Brother Phil, what they ask of us. And right now they're asking us to come to sweats. And some of my friends in the ecology movement, why are we doing all these sweats? What's the point of But you know, we did those sweats for a whole year. And we came over, and you know, and we did the sweats, and we had meals at your place, and we brought food, and we dined together, we ate together. And you know what? That was a really good lesson for me and for a lot of my friends, ecology friends, because what it was a lesson in building community first before we just jump in to take action. We built community first, and being in those sweats, we shared our deepest fears, our sorrows, the things that broke our hearts, the challenges with our families and our friends, and the things that we hoped for, all our hopes and dreams, and we shared all that over and over again, and we shared food together. And you know what? That really built a strong alliance. And that was a really good lesson for a lot of the environmentalists to see that's the most important thing. To start, you have to have that deep alliance with people and family. And then we eventually did start doing actions, and we blockaded the Kinder Morgan plant, and your mom was up there chained to the fence, and you know, we occupied the whole Kinder Morgan place, and we did a lot of actions. But first we built community and alliance together, and you know, that deep alliances still exist to this day, and that's why we're all here right now, because we built that alliance, and we became brothers for life. And you know, I have since moved up to Cortez Island with my family, and but you know, still we're all in this together. And so I'm really grateful for that experience, of how we did that, and I learned a lot, and I think that's very important. And I often share that story, Ruben, with my other ecology friends, and explain to them why I felt that was so important.
Yeah, I remember that meeting. You guys did your presentation, and I was with Curtis Ahanike.
That's right.
And he spoke first after you guys presented, and Curtis stood up and goes, "Oh, I'd die to stop this." Then he more or less sat down and he looked at me, and I was like, "Well, I guess I'm in." And then the next day we spoke at the Vancouver City Council, and I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But you know, when it was Robert Nahaney also, the sweats you went to, and down in the elder, our teacher from Squamish Nation. We went to both his sweat and my sweat, and my mom was there, my family's there, of course. And that's what we wanted to show, is that community, and we wanted to show why we're doing what we do. Is like you continue when you're in town, come to ceremony when we can. You still do. And remember, Ben West was my fireman he's my first fireman. When the transition happened from my brother Damien running the lodge to me. Then when I took over, Ben West was the first fireman for a couple of years. And he still comes to ceremony. Actually, we do little spiritual talks on Zoom, and privately, Ben and West and I we just recently. And but part of it is, you know, you mentioned that in the beginning part of your talk, where we can't live without the light of the sun. We say fire in our ceremonies, earth, water and sky, the air. Any of those things that are screwed up, we're all screwed. We need all those things. So what we do is we, like, everybody knows smudge, and you and I, we traveled and we prayed with indigenous people all over the world. And some of the trips that we did together, from everywhere, they came in, and what we noticed is they do the same thing as we do. They use fire, earth, water, and sky in their ceremonies.
Yeah.
And all of them have some sort of smudge, candle, incense. They light it, and that represents earth. Then the fire represents the energy of the sun. But when you put two elements together, and it gives birth to a spirit, and that's what that smoke is. And then we take that spirit with intention and we smudge. But that's what we wanted to show, is that building that reciprocal relationship of community between each other. But you mentioned it already in your talk. I mean, before this question, you mentioned that our relationship to everything is important, and we have words for that. And you and I heard those words from spiritual leaders from all over the world. And here in Coast Salish territory, we say Natsamat, one heart, one mind, one prayer. Everything has a spirit. And Lakota say Mitakiase.
Mitakiase.
All my relation. We heard those things, and so yeah, it's pretty. That's what we wanted to show. But you know, it's sort of funny picturing you and Ben West driving around the res, looking for some allies. But that was your intention that you put out there, and I'm glad we ended up working on this. It's been a long road since, and you know, a lot of people moved away, and including Ben, but his, you know, we still talk about this. Tara Stafford, we still talk about this. Phil Lane, we talk often. Robert Nahaney, we talk every other day. And there's Daryl Bob too, came a little while after us, and we talk weekly as well. So there's a lot of the key group there, which was about 20 of us that were doing ceremony together. And at first it was every single week for the 3 months before we talked any business. And then we started, okay, let's start doing some actions after the 3 months. And then the whole year we kept on praying together, and it was a really good start. And I didn't tell you this, but I went to Carter Camp, which is one of the founders of Ames movement. And I talked to him as well, and he gave the same advice. But it's been good. It's been good, Rex. And I think that people would be interested in some of your books that you've written. And even some of the documents that you've written. You and Phil Lane did that beautiful document on the state of the world, and you know, those are really important information. What I'm finding is some of the people that are in here are my spiritual family, and some of the group that we do ceremony with. We have a Facebook page, and we do ceremony together, yeah, I'm interested in that, the state of the world, that document that you written with Phil Lane.
Yeah, we wrote a document called The State of Mother Earth, and we talked about all of the challenges, the ecological challenges that we faced, and how they were all connected. And and then when we all went to, remember when we went to Paris for the climate conference,
yes.
And we met outside of Paris at this old castle place. It was freezing cold, for one thing. It was very cold, and it was but we all stayed there. We had a great time. We all ate together, and we met with indigenous people from all over the world. It was fantastic. Sami people from the north, from Finland, and with Mongol people who were there, indigenous people from Africa, from the South Pacific, from North and South America. It was fantastic, and it felt so good to be in that group of people who were all there for each other, and all for the purpose of making serious change. And we were saying back then, during that Paris climate conference, which I think was 2015, 16. I believe so. Yeah. We were saying that this is just a bunch of talk. They're not doing anything. They're not making any serious changes. And so here we are now, 2021, 6 years later. That Paris Agreement, nobody's keeping their pledges. Countries made pledges about reducing there's not one country is meeting their Paris pledge. So, all these government meetings, I swear, I really believe strongly that, the governments are not going to solve these problems. The people have to come together to solve these problems. I feel very strongly about that. We've had since the 1970s, we've had 34 international climate conferences over 45 years. And our global carbon emissions have gone up every year for those 45 years. Those conferences have done nothing. So anyway, that was one of the themes that came up during our meeting with the indigenous people from all over the world in Paris, and we were talking about that you know, we can't rely on these governments, so we have to do it ourselves. And yeah, so that's why we're here. Now, I write an article. I just posted the link to my articles. So if anybody wants to read stuff I write about ecology, environment, and I write about indigenous movements and so forth. Oh, wait a minute. That thing I just posted, that's the wrong one. That's the... yeah, I'm going to edit that for you. Sorry.
Sure, no worries.
I'll get the right one. What happened here?
I read a few of your articles, Rex, before this.
What's that?
I read a few of your articles before this, and there was one I found interesting about the connection of ecological grief and common addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk to us a little bit about ecological grief?
Yeah, there's the correct one, the correct link. Yeah, I wrote that article about basically what I was writing about ecological trauma. And to me, ecological trauma is this: that I believe every one of us and every human being on Earth suffers the trauma of watching our Mother Earth be destroyed. And even if we're not aware, it hurts us. And it hurts us psychologically because it is our mother. And I believe that, and also if you look at, you know, early human history, we all grew up in small communities in the being taken care of by an ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem. That was where we got our food. That's what protected us and gave us all the resources we ever needed to live. And I think that the loss of the environment and the damage of the environment and the abuse of the environment, it's like witnessing a member of your family getting abused. If we witness a member of our family getting abused, we feel the abuse. We also suffer the trauma. And I think it's the same thing with the environment. And so I made the comparison that I think the way the human family is acting it's like an addiction. And many of us have dealt with addictions and had friends and family who've dealt with addictions to drugs, addictions to alcohol, addictions to food, addictions to all kinds of things, addictions to gambling. And what are all these addictions are? I think it's the individual trying to fill up an empty space that's inside of us. And that empty space, I believe, is connected to seeing our Mother Earth, which historically took care of us. It's like observing our own mother being abused. I think it hurts us deeply, even if we're not conscious of it. So anyway, I won't go on, but that was what that article was about, and it's called Ecological Addiction Ecological Trauma and Common Addiction. If you Google that, if you Google my name, Rex Weiler, and ecological trauma and common addiction, you'll get that article. You'll find it. It's on my website. I should give you my own website, but
I can post it.
You can post it, Christine.
What would you say a good remedy to that ecological grief and trauma would be?
Taking action. Like, I think if you see somebody in your family who's being abused and you don't do anything, it makes your own trauma worse. But if you stand up for someone who's being, it's like being in the schoolyard and seeing somebody being bullied. If you're able to stand up to that bully, that's your contribution, and that protects you from feeling that trauma. So I think when we take action against the abuse of the earth, that helps heal us from that trauma of observing and watching members of our own family, our larger family, being abused. And it's not easy to take action. It's not easy to stand up to the bullies sometimes, but it's like anything else. The more you practice, the better you get.
I see that when people find the relief in witnessing and doing something, it's just like, it's that some things that really end up resonating with people. Like, they got that big turtle, and they pulled the straw out of its nose, and a whole bunch of people got on this big band to ban straws all over North America. And that's a interesting story. But there's other things too, like animals, our dogs, for example. When people, you see them go viral of a dog being rescued, and they empathize and want to create change for that. But it's funny, because that change that they create is, we're actually like the dog or like that turtle. We're the ones that are suffering too. We're the ones that are breaking down. We're the ones that aren't as healthy as we used to be. We're the ones that are things are screwing up, and they're changing, and they're changing quick. But we have about 30 more minutes, and it's good that Christine jumped in with those questions, because that's what I was going to go to next. But before we do that, I want to ask one more question. And Rex, in your heart, when you just talked about what you just did, it made me think of what created the change for you, and how old were you? Where you knew that you wanted to do something and be part of creating change, and now you have a long history of doing some pretty good work and creating some change.
Well, I mentioned to you, reading that book, Silent Spring, which had a big influence on me when I was young. But earlier than that, I grew up in a pretty wild place in Wyoming. And so I grew up in the natural world. And of course, as a child, we just take it for granted. As a child, we grow up in a beautiful wild world, and we're not aware of everything that's going on in the rest of the world. But I remember, Ruben, one day when I was just a little kid. I was probably 5 years old, maybe younger, 4 or 5 years old. And I went on a hike with my sister, which is what we did. I mean, we just played out in the woods. But we climbed these rocks, and we climbed this little mountain, and we got out on this ledge, and I got stuck. I couldn't go forward. I couldn't go backwards. I was petrified. I was afraid.
You froze.
And my sister slid down. My sister was older than me, 2 years older. And she slid down, and she's saying, "You can do it. You can do it." And I'm going, "No." So she went back to where we lived to get help, to get someone to help me, and left me sitting there on this little ledge on these rocks all alone. And do you know what a magpie is, right? You've seen a magpie.
Yeah.
It's a prairie bird. And this magpie flew down. And now imagine, I'm just a little kid, and this magpie flew down and was sitting on this rock ledge. And this magpie was looking at me, and looking at me, and backing up and looking at me. And it was the first time in my life that I'd ever been in a situation where the wild world was looking back at me, or I got that feeling. And until, and I was looking at this bird, and the bird was not afraid of me. I was just a little kid, and the bird was not afraid of me. The bird was really curious about me, and that had a profound effect on me, where I realized that this other creature was as curious about me as I was about it. And, I think that somehow that fixed in me kind of a sense that you could have a relationship with the natural world and the other creatures. But the thing that really got me going, Ruben, was, I don't know if anybody remembers or not, but in the most of you probably weren't even alive at this time, but in the 1960s, there was a river in Ohio called the Cuyahoga River, and it was so polluted with industrial waste. They also had those pipes. People were just dumping all kinds of chemical garbage in these rivers. The river caught on fire. The river was burning. The Cuyahoga River was burning in Ohio. And I remember as a young man, I was a teenager at the time. I remember thinking, the rivers are on fire? Well, surely, I mean, that's a powerful image. Like, surely people will see that Mother Earth is in trouble. I didn't even know the expression Mother Earth at the time. I just felt the pain. The rivers were burning, and I felt like this has to wake us up. And I was just a teenager, but still I realized this is a sign. If the rivers are burning, this is a sign. And then it was shortly after that I read that book I was telling you about, Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. And I realized that, I don't know, just somehow I just realized that my life had to be about protecting what's pure and good about the wild world. And I think that experience of the rivers burning was the thing that really pushed me over the edge for the first time, and made me feel like we as a human family have to change our ways. And I'm 72 now, Ruben. I was probably 17 or 18 at the time, so this is over 50 years ago. And I'm really grateful, actually, that I've taken this path, because if you reach out and help the earth, she reaches back and helps you. That I'm convinced of that. And she will help you help her. And I think we've all experienced that. Like, when we reach out and help our Mother Earth, we get blessings back. We get the magic back. And so I'm grateful that I've dedicated my life to this kind of work. And I think it's important also, if we're going to be active in our lives, and I think it's also important that we have to take care of ourselves as well. And that's where building community, having meals together, having ceremony, doing these talks with each other, it's all part of it, because we have to look after ourselves. you can burn out if you just doing the work, and it can get really depressing. But if you have your allies and your friends, and you take care of yourself and each other, then you can do it.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Longevity is such a important thing in this work. I think from those original meetings, I'm the only one left that's full time, and even in the broader scale of who started in the beginning, with all our, because remember we pulled that meeting together and 40 allies showed up. You know, Ben West was saying the allies were sort of, we're not working together at that time, and they're pretty happy that Tislewitu stood up and said, no, let's come together and do some good work. But even that, a lot of the same allies are, a lot of them have, you know, it gets burnout, it gets tiring, and you need to, when people have kids, they need to focus on their families, but longevity is important, or you be like me and get your kids right involved.
Yeah. Yeah, you got your kids involved, all right. How's Cedar doing?
He's good. He's about to come home. I haven't seen him very much because of COVID. His down in Seattle is about to come home, and he goes, I got some big plans, Dad, but I'm not telling you. And it's okay.
And how about that smart girl, Kaya?
Oh, she's great. I think she's people know that she's taken a couple semesters off of university, so would have been her 6th year, and but she took this year off, and so they know she's available, so they're offering her jobs, and it's just she could be really busy if she wants to, but they want to focus on themselves, and
yeah, sure, of course,
they're becoming young adults, so they want to figure things out for themselves, and you know, and just like your kids, you know, your kids are solid and doing really well, and it's always good to see them, but you know, what you just said too is when what we're talking about is sort of like our title, and people might wonder about that, but it's truth, family, health, and culture. That's Kosei Lishla, and from all the work that we did in the last 10 years of and then coincided with the work that Tsleil-Waututh Nation did, it's also working within that law, whether it's economic development, housing, education, it's all similar and growing. So all the like-minded people that you know, and when you look at the poster, you probably know all the people. They think the same way. It's those, and then adding those fundamentals of any religious or any spiritual belief of love and honor and respect and all those good things that create humanity. Then we apply those to what we love. And that magpie is like, I think a lot of the environmentalists have a similar story, that something touched their soul, like a soulful relationship to whatever they experienced, and wanted to do something for it, because what it does for us, it's just like the studies on trees of how we receive the positive energy from trees. A simple thing. It's a simple thing, but walking in the woods, something will happen. You have plants in your house, something will happen to you. Those are live things that have spirit. They really have spirit, and that's why it's truth, family, health, and culture. But we got just over 15 minutes. Peter, or you have a question, and then Christine?
Sure, yeah, I can ask a question. I do want to remind people that are watching the live stream on Facebook, make sure to write your questions in the comments for Rex. But I'll kick us off here. And Rex, my question is around sort of the peace part of Greenpeace, because I think the environmental movement has, still has a long way to go, but has sort of become mainstream, and people have somewhat taken on the consciousness of protecting our planet. And I'm curious what you think the peace movement needs to do to get there as well.
Yeah, the peace movement really needs to get needs a rebirth, I think. It's almost the reverse of what it was in the 1970s. In the 1970s, we used to say, you know, we want to put the green into the peace movement. We want to make it a green peace. We felt that we needed to an awareness of ecology. Well, now there's a huge, you know, global ecology, environmental movement, and I think the peace movement has kind of gotten quiet. But look at what's going on in the world today. All the militarism, all the armies, all the money that's spent, trillions of dollars. I mean, we say $1 trillion. Well, what's $1 trillion? That's 1,000 billion. What's a billion? That's 1,000 million. It's just, it's hard to grasp, you know, that amount of money that's being spent on military. $1 trillion. I think the global budget now, military budget, is like $3 trillion. That's $3,000 billion. Imagine what could be done with that money. Imagine what you could do for society to take care of people, to take care of our elders, to take care of our young people, to make sure that everybody had food to eat. So I think, you know, in answer to your question, Peter, I think that, you know, the peace movement needs to understand that it's also a human rights issue, because that's money that's being drained away from social improvements and just being wasted on military and militarism. So, you know, it's connected to the social movement. It's also connected to the environmental movement, because the militaries of the world, of Russia, China, the United States, all the militaries of the world, they're the most polluting. Military is the most destructive, most polluting industry in the world. So the human rights movement, social rights, peace movement, and ecology movement really are all connected. So I think that, you know, there needs to be a sort of revitalization of the peace movement. We used to say we want to put the green in Greenpeace, and now it's like we want to put the peace back in Greenpeace. But we want to put the peace movement, you know, the peace movement in its own right needs energy from the young people, and I don't exactly know how that's going to happen, but it needs to happen. There needs to be a renewal of the peace movement.
That's right. Thank you. Did you have another question, Peter, or Christine?
Christine, were there any that came in over the live stream?
There weren't any that came through on Facebook, but I have a couple more questions. One is, you wrote a book called Chop Wood, Carry Water. Yeah. I've heard people say that before as a saying. If you could just explain what that means and for people.
Well, yeah, there's an old expression. It comes from Buddhism, that saying, chop wood, carry water. And there's an old saying from Buddhist tradition where a monk is explaining to a student what Buddhism means. And he says, well, before enlightenment, you chopping wood and you're carrying water. After enlightenment, you're chopping wood and carrying water. And you know, my interpretation of what that means is, when we gain wisdom, we still just go back to the basics of life. Like when we gain wisdom, we don't stop doing the normal things of life. We raise our children, we take care of our family, we chop the wood, we carry the water, we do all. It's like spiritual awareness is not something fancy. It's not like if we're spiritually aware that we're something above anybody. It's like it's still basic life. And if we develop wisdom, if we develop awareness, spiritual awareness, we go about our daily chores, but we have that little awareness that it's a sacred path. It's just like Ruben and Phil telling us we're gonna do the activism. We're gonna take on these pipeline companies and Kinder Morgan. We're gonna take them on and we're gonna stop this pipeline, but it has to be a spiritual process. So you do the same stuff. You chop the wood, you carry the water, you do the activism, you take care of your family, you feed your family, you take care of each other. When you develop wisdom, you don't stop doing all that stuff. You just keep doing it. I think that's what that means. And that book, Chop Wood, Carry Water, it's about this. It's about lessons from spiritual traditions all over the world, and it's taking the spiritual teachings indigenous people, the Muslim spiritual tradition, Buddhism, Taoism, all the traditions of the world have wisdom. And so that's what that book is about. It's about looking for the wisdom in all those traditions.
Cool. I love it. It reminds me of ceremony, how important those basic things are in order to have the ceremony and build the community before sitting with each other. So I really appreciate that. And then the last question I would have is, what are the current updates and state of affairs in regards to the Chevron oil spill in the Amazon?
Well, Chevron dumped about 140 billion gallons of toxic wastewater into the Amazon in Ecuador. They caused a cancer epidemic. They caused they had birth defects. People died of all kinds of cancers, stomach cancer. It's just terrible what happened to the people of Ecuador. And they did that. Chevron, it was originally Texaco, but Chevron bought the company Texaco, so it's Chevron's responsibility. And the reason they did that, the reason they dumped that waste into the jungle was because it was cheaper. For every barrel of oil that they produced, they saved about $3. Over the course of 20 years, they saved about $5 billion. They made an extra $5 billion. And instead of following the normal regulations for treating that toxic waste, they just dumped it in the jungle. They just dumped it in the streams, in the rivers, everywhere. And so the oil production stopped in 1992, but in about 2000, a group of 30, there were 30,000 indigenous and campesino victims of Chevron's pollution in Ecuador. And they filed a lawsuit against Chevron, and they filed that lawsuit in New York in the United States. And Chevron insisted and fought for that court case to be held in Ecuador. And they eventually held the case in Ecuador. And the court case took 6 years. And there were hundreds of judicial scientific reviews of the oil fields. And it was proven beyond a doubt that Chevron and Texaco had dumped that oil, and they dumped it on purpose, and they had caused this cancer epidemic and destroyed land and destroyed rivers. And they lost the case. The victims of the oil spill won the case, and the courts in Ecuador awarded the victims $9.5 billion. That's what Chevron owes the victims, $9.5 billion. But Chevron has refused to pay. They sold all of their assets in Ecuador. They left Ecuador. They left the country and they have refused to pay. But it's even more than that. Then they filed lawsuits against the victims themselves and against their lawyers. And now they've tied up the lawyers and the victims with lawsuits in the United States. And they've just created legal chaos. And they have spent, now Chevron has now spent $2 billion on lawyers and public relations firms and private investigators to harass the victims and the lawyers, to try and intimidate them. You talk about standing up to the bullies. I mean, these guys are the ultimate bullies in the world. And they've spent $2 billion to try and intimidate the lawyers and the victims. But the lawyers and the victims are not giving up. And so currently, there's a lawyer in the United States. His name is Stephen Donziger. He's been fighting Chevron for, all of his adult life. He's been fighting them for 20 years. And they've accused, they found a friendly judge in the United States, a corporate friendly judge who used to be a tobacco company lawyer. And they got this, they filed a court case against the lawyer, Donziger, in the New York Second Circuit. And they've now, and then the judge insisted that Donziger turn over his cell phone and his computer to Chevron. And he says, no, I'm not going to turn over my cell phone. I mean, there's such a thing as attorney-client privilege. You can't force someone to turn over their communications with their clients. Anyway, this is what Chevron has done to this guy. And when he refused to turn over his computer, he got charged with contempt of court. So now that's where the case stands. Is Chevron has engineered this contempt of court against the lawyer. So they're just wasting money and wasting everybody's time instead of paying the victim. They could have paid the victims that $2 billion, but they don't want the precedent. They don't want to be held responsible. And this is the problem that we face with these large, oil companies and pipeline companies and mining companies. They don't want to be held responsible for their actions. They want to be able to go into someplace and plunder the resources and take the resources and leave behind a toxic waste and garbage and not be held responsible. But we're not giving up, and the lawyers are not giving up, and the people are not giving up, and ultimately, I believe Chevron is going to have to pay the money they owe. They're going to run out of tricks eventually, and they won't run out of money. A company like Chevron has hundreds of billions of dollars of assets, so they're not going to run out of money, but it's going to catch up with them eventually. And the lawyers are still working on it. So we still believe that we're going to be able to get that Chevron to pay the money that they owe, and that money can go to those communities in Ecuador and heal those communities. In the meantime, people have died from cancer. People, have spent their lives with birth defects. And yeah, go ahead, Ruben.
Sorry, Rex. Sorry, interrupting. We're about to. We have about a minute left, and I just want to thank you. Thank you for doing this. We do have a question, but when we go off live stream, maybe you can answer that question. But I want to thank you for all the work that you did and what you continue to do. And you're part of our family. Papa Phil Lane and my mom adopted you into our family, and so really good to see you. And I look forward to praying with you soon. When all this COVID stuff is over with, and it's a blessing to have you on our path and to have you being so open and both of us have been so lucky to travel the world and pray with so many different people and to be welcomed into those sacred circles of some of those indigenous people that are, you know, we might have a little bit of freedom of speech up here, but Trudeau, you know, tramples our indigenous rights, but down there they don't. In some of the places you mentioned, we know friends that have been murdered and killed by industry.
Yeah.
And so you know, we support them, and we'll always stand with them in solidarity too. And I guess there's a trip that we'll be planning to go down in Brazil soon, as soon as COVID's lifted, and I'm sure that you're probably in talks with Philane about that too. But thank you, Rex. I love you.
Hey, my pleasure. And I want to make sure that we get to answer Marianne's question here, but but we'll have time after we close.
Yeah. As soon as we close, we'll have time, but we're gonna end the live stream here right now. And thank you, Christine. Thank you, Peter, and thank you everybody for tuning in. I've been avoiding the sun here. Check this out. I'll show you really quick. This is where I'm at. Beautiful area. There's the ocean.
Oh.
So thank you, everybody.